Welcome back. As a continuation of the short series of videos I'm doing where I'm exploring JavaScript and how it handles object-oriented programming. In this video, we're going to look at ES6 classes. If you have not seen the video walking through constructors with prototypes and the details of that object creation pattern, then definitely look at that first because classes are really just syntactic sugar. In the last video we talked about prototypes, constructors, that whole object creation pattern as being the pseudo-classical approach, and classes and ES6 classes just takes that one step further in trying to make it easier for a developer who might be familiar with the classical object-oriented programming approach in other languages. And so JavaScript added a few key words to make it easier for someone who's familiar with those patterns to transition to working in JavaScript. So let's jump in here. Here on the left side, we have the exact code that we ended with at the end of our constructors with prototypes object creation pattern video. And on this side, I have replicated this code, but with ES6 classes. So let's just start at the top and start working our way through. We're going to start with the classes, and then we'll see how it ties back into the pattern that we're already familiar with. So we see a new class keyword here, hit song. We don't have these parentheses here. We go right into a curly bracket, and you can see that ends down here. This constructor keyword here, now we have our parentheses and we see some parameters, and you can think of this section right here, the class, the name, the constructor word with the parameters, and then this method as this whole section of code on the left, this function hit song. We pass in the parameters and we have our function body here. These are essentially the same pieces on this side. And then we have this generic lyrics. We can go back to a shorthand syntax, and this is located still within the body of our class hit song, and this is doing the same exact thing as on the left side. We have hit song.prototype. So you can guess where JavaScript is taking this generic lyrics method on the right side and putting it. It's putting it into hit song.prototype. So even though we don't have that .prototype object specified anywhere here, that's one of the nice things that the class, that the new keywords and functionality in ES6 does for us. It hides some of this work that we were explicitly doing before. It hides some of that away behind the cleaner, more intuitive syntax. Okay, so this class hit song has been defined and is doing the same thing as these bits of code on the left side with our constructor. Next, we defined another class, and we say that this extends. So we have a new keyword here, the extends, and just reading this gives us a good idea of what it does. Class dance hit song extends hit song. Well, we have a good idea that same relationship before, where we have our dance hit song that we define, and we can see the same thing over here. We have this class, the name, constructor, our parameters, and then right here we have another new keyword, super. Super is doing the same work as hitsong.call, and it's provided an explicit execution context, right? So we know how we're going to use dance hit song, this class, when we use the new keyword down here. we're going to pass in our title and the date created. We have that right here. And we can think of this super as just invoking the parent. So the parent is going to look at the hidden prototype reference for dance hit song, and that's going up to the parent above this this class up here. This is the parent that it's extending, and we're going to invoke this function. It's not invoking everything in this class, right? We're just looking at this constructor. That's what it's invoking when we use this super keyword. So if you look at super, title and date, it's just coming up here. Think of it as this function right here just being brought right into this context down here when we use the super keyword. It's the sub type going up to the super type, the child to the parent, grabbing this constructor method on the parent object. Okay, and so again, that's functionality. The hitSong.call is being replaced by super. And then same thing, we have our methods here, and we can look on this the left side here in our old definition. They're being put in the prototype object. And so again, the class keyword, all this hard work that we were doing before is just being cleaned up, and these methods are being put into that prototype object so that we can inherit down the line. And not only is JavaScript with the ES6 class keywords, not only is it cleaning up the work that we were doing with our prototype and reassigning our prototype object to maintain our inheritance chain, but the constructor. Remember, we also had to fix the constructor reference. When we reassigned that prototype object, we had to go back and fix the constructor so it pointed back to the constructor function. And you don't see that anywhere on this side. That's part of what JavaScript is hiding for us with the ES6 classes. And then we see the another class, rock hit song. I'm not going to walk through that because it's the exact same as we just walked through up here. But let's go ahead and get our diagram back on the screen to see what's changed with our diagram. Okay, I have our diagram that we ended with from the constructors with prototypes. And this is after we went ahead and fixed connecting the prototype objects up the chain. We reassigned the constructors back to point to the constructor, with the constructor properties to point back to the constructor function. And now we have our ES6 classes, and let me bring up the diagram for this. Oh, did you miss it? I put it up. Let me switch back. Alright, now I'm going to switch again. Alright, I'm just pulling your leg. There is no difference. It's the same. There are some tiny differences in the way JavaScript displays some of these relationships, but the relationships of the objects to each other, the constructors going up the chain, we can see, and actually let's run these tests here. So we're following the prototype chain. I'm just going to do one of them here, this born to be wild. Does that equal rock hit song dot prototype? Does rock hit song dot prototype, does that go up the chain to hit song dot prototype, hit song dot prototype, object prop dot prototype, and all the way up to null? Alright, so this should all be true. And then we have down here looking at our constructors. So rock hit song dot prototype dot constructor, and then we're going to check just to make sure that rock hit song's not grabbing something from above, and we're going to make sure it has its own property constructor, and then we're going to do the same thing with hit song. Okay, so let's go ahead and check this. Everything is just as we expect. Okay, all these are true. These relationships are all verified, and we can see it's actually an improvement itself. We see more information here when we look at the constructor property. We see its class and it's extending hit song. So this is great. So let's take a minute to talk about some of the nuances of working with classes. Right now we have class declarations, but we could change this to a class expression. Okay, so we have a class expression here and a class declaration. There really isn't a difference here. When we think about functions, a function declaration we know is hoisted, and a function expression is not. The class declaration is not hoisted like a function declaration is. The difference between these two, there really is no difference between using a declaration or an expression. Another nuance would be the static keyword. So if we, for some reason, didn't want this solid guitar riff method on the prototype object of Rock Hit Song, we don't have to have it there. Right now it's an instance method. It's inherited by the instances of Rock Hit Song, but we could move it onto the Rock Hit Song itself with the static keyword. The kind of hint or the key to thinking about the way this works goes back to our conversations early in this video series when we looked at the documents and we looked at the way things were defined, and as that being a clue to where JavaScript is storing those things. So think about the way that you would have to call this static method on Rock Hit Song. Let's go down here. We go to log out using these different method calls. So we're going to use our static method, rock hit song dot solid guitar riff. Okay, born to be wild. I'm just going to use the child down here, and I'm going to call this method that we have defined up on this Rock Hit Song class. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to try the same thing, but with this solid guitar riff. And I'm pretty sure you know what's going to happen. Okay, we get an error. But we were able to run our first two method calls, right? We used our static method call, and then you were able to use the prototype, right? And by the time we've gone through all this, I'm pretty sure that those things they feel pretty good. We can go back and think about the way that we are calling other things, right? We can remember our object.create. This is a static method, so you know where that's going to be defined up here. It's not going to be on this prototype object. It's going to be on the object function itself. Born to be wild is an object, and it inherits this has-own property by going up the prototype chain to get it. But that static keyword, so if we're using our own classes, that static keyword makes the difference for where JavaScript puts that. They're both defined here in the body of the class, but that's the difference. And that's really it for ES6 classes. I do feel like I kind of glossed over a few things, but essentially that's what ES6 classes are doing themselves. They're glossing over the details of the constructor and prototype pattern. So that's it.